We were at Penzic, which is a big nerd get together where everyone's dressed in armor or tights and fancy clothes. And we speak in these and thous and my lords and my ladies. And we were all gathered together at this huge field, thousands of campfires all over the place, tents, drums in the distance, dancing ladies. And from campfire to campfire, bards would go. And we'd have a drink or two, sing a few songs with the people around the campfire and move on. It was a brilliant, wonderful, amazing affair. And at the end of this giant war, whoever loses gets control of Pennsylvania, the state of Pennsylvania. So it's a big kind of tongue-in-cheek thing, and it's a lot of fun. But I remember this night, it was amazing. There was a haze of campfire over everything. It was a beautiful sliver of moon in the sky, and everything was just, there was a mood, a feel. You could hear the drums, feel it in your bones. And sitting around the campfire with a bunch of more than slightly inebriated people, this guy showed up out of nowhere wearing t-shirts, wearing a t-shirt and ripped jeans and sneakers, not really getting in the whole mood of the SCA. But he sat down, and when we offered him a chance at the Bardic Circle, he did this story. And I've never found it online. I have no idea who this guy is. If anybody knows this story, I'm going to fuck it up, just so we're clear. The way he told it was amazing, and I'm not going to reproduce it. But it has been a long time since it's even occurred to me that I know this. So, with the idea that I'm probably going to screw it up, let's have a little fun with it. We awoke in the desert. The sun beating down on us, tearing at our tender skin. Thousands of us, millions of us, in the red sand, in the dust. And we stood. There was nothing to do. And slowly, like some migrating sense, we began to move, a slow shuffling at the distant edges of this mass of humanity, naked and burning in the sun. We began to go that way. And we moved, slowly at first, and then with greater speed, as if actually there was some purpose to our movement. If we weren't just doing something because we didn't know why we were here, if we weren't all confused terribly by the situation, but none of us talked about it, none of us discussed it, we just walked. And the day ate itself away, and exhausted as night settled, we collapsed where we were. Our feet blistered and burning, our skin first coated with sweat, now clammy and chill and burned, blisters popping as we hit the ground. And the next day, we woke up and we did it again. And day after day, this endless mass of humanity, rivers of people, baked by the sun, maddened with thirst, just walking. And as we walked, it seemed that there was no longer this aimlessness, as if this first completely arbitrary decision to go that way by some nameless person in this giant mass of humanity had not only been completely intentional, but fated, as if there was no other choice we could have possibly made in life but to go this way, because that way was a holy direction and we were called. And what originally began as just a sense, a guess, a whim, became fate, became the universe giving us an impossible to ignore directive that we must go this way. And what began as just a group of people moving soon became an enforcement of it, with people at the edges nudging those who drifted along or started to wander off a different way. And then as the days grew longer and harder and our bodies grew thin and skeletal, it became less nudging and more of commandment. No, we go this way. They never spoke. There were no words. There was simply elbows and bony wrists and knees and bruises and dry blood, the same color as the red sandy soil that we walked across. I don't know how long we walked. I know it was more than a week, because I could have kept track of a week. We slept, I think, again after the first week, but I'm not sure. Everything blended together, and sometimes there are moons in my memory, but mostly it's just the sun. And then we started dying. One or two of us passing out. The first people would move around them in sacred awareness that somebody had passed. But the people who followed later didn't hold that, and the bodies were trod on, first by accident, and then by apathy, and at the end, maybe just because they could, because they were angry. Somebody over there had made the decision to go this way, and if one of them were to fall, well, that's what they got for starting this whole damn thing. And the bodies were trampled into the red soil, and they became the dust that we ate, that we breathed, that caked our insides, that bled out of our nose. And then we saw it off in the distance, an impossible wall, huge, towering, even from what was obviously a fabulous distance. It was still earth-shakingly tall. And what had begun to slow down began to speed up again. The image of this wall, huge and red and uncaring, this was fate, this was destiny, and we were drawn towards it magnetically. And once again, the dragging feet began to pick up and move, and this mass of humanity became an ocean, became a swell, became waves. And when days later we reached the wall, we hammered against it with our bodies, and we imagined that it shook, but it didn't. It fought us off with its uncaringness. The first waves of people slammed against it, howling, screaming, beating on it, and were trampled down by the people who came seconds later, and by the people who came minutes later. And what became originally just a handful of people on the wall became a slope leading upwards as people hammered into it and then fell beneath the people who hammered into it behind them. By that time, I was too far in the back. The people who had been nudging people into order had gotten too excited by the wall, and I found myself drifting off. I watched as they hammered the wall, and some part of me said I would go this way instead. And I walked until the howling grew faint, until the tang of blood and the snap of bones became quiet in the distance. And I found my piece of the wall. And it had been too long. I was small, I was frail, I was exhausted. Every breath I made coughed out red dust. But I found a brick, and I put my finger against it, and I began drawing on the mortar. The square, over and over and over, until the mortar of the wall became wet with what blood I had left. And when that blood ran out and the mortar had gotten an inch or two deep, it became the whiteness of bone scraping against the brick. And I kept at it, and the sounds of the great mass of humanity faded from my mind until I could put my entire hand into the crevices. And shaking and weak, I continued to dig at the mortar until one day a brick came out. And I started on the next brick, and the next brick, until I was inside the wall. And as my breathing grew labored and the nubs of my fingers grew too short to really pull at it, I tried. And I found ways to make the bricks move. And there, in the darkness, away from the sun, away from the insanity of the people that I had come with, I felt the last brick move. And instead of pulling, I pushed. And my very last sense was my hand in the cold white snow on the other side of the wall.